So in any case, he comes back, and they have no choice but to go through with the marriage, because the father intervenes and says, go through with it, boy. You can't hide up here in the hills any longer. You've got to do your duty and bring a grandson to the Frankenstein lineage, right? This is the purpose of marriage, after all. You have to get her pregnant and bring a new son to the family. That's the whole point. The marriage isn't about you and your happiness. The marriage has a social function here for the family system. And so he attempts to go through with the marriage, but his alter ego, the monster, enters into the home, and he cannot keep it out. He cannot keep his repressed, monstrous unconscious from interfering with the attempt at completing the wedding. And his conscious mind, in order to protect his bride, locks her in her room as if she's a child who can't defend herself and needs to be treated as if she has no free will or has no right to move in and out on her own. He takes the role of the parent and treats her as a child. And of course, locked in her room, that's when the monster crawls through the window and attacks her. And she can't get out because his conscious mind has locked her in. So it's this moment when he attempts to have a relationship with his future wife. And of course, it's a monstrous failure. But the woman is not destroyed by it. She survives it, and it's the monster who runs away. He has to flee. And so we see the complete collapse and inability for this man to get his own psychological nature into a unified, adult, loving, and strong mode of being. He is now out of his element, and the monstrous part of him now runs wild, and the whole town has to be brought together into a posse in order to capture the monster. As you probably know, the monster, I'm spoiling the film for you all, but I think I need to do this so that you can see this as the dream it is. The final burning, I think this is the original Burning Man ceremony. The monster has to burn in this wooden windmill. Again, we have an echo of Don Quixote, etc. But he has to burn, and he is not happy about it. The monster is very frightened himself. The monster is not all that monstrous, you see, and he is helpless. He can't communicate. He is silent, but he is totally fearful. His strength and his apparently monstrous ability is only an image, and inside of that image there is only terror. So it is the monster himself who is the one who feels the terror in the film, not the other. Just as every male ego feels terror upon confronting the possibility of a relationship with a woman, and cannot either carry it through, or feels inadequate or impotent, or in some way having to put up a false front, or having to relate with some compensatory persona, or has to dominate and make sure that the woman is kept from being able to reach him. And so the question is really from the woman's perspective now, because the woman who's going to marry him has another man by her side whose name is Victor, And he is seemingly the real adult gentleman who would have been the proper husband for this woman, and she's not interested in him. And so the other question is, why is it that the female wants to be with the inadequate man who can only create a monstrous alter ego, but cannot be there at a level of human relationality in which there is equality, which this other man would have provided, and she has absolutely no erotic interest in it. And so I would have to say that what the woman wants then is a man who is not either afraid of her or not her equal, because if so, she will end up being either disgusted with him, or there will be a power struggle that will be a stalemate and a Cold War, or there will simply be no erotic fantasy possible, because it will all be too down to earth and more of a business negotiation than it will be a romance. And so what we see here is the collapse of the possibility of romanticism to be able to function as the thread of a human relationship in a marriage. And rather than that, we see that the woman would prefer to be battered by a monstrous man who can sexually dominate her, because at least her own ego will be able to feel she's with someone who's not afraid of her and someone who she can't dominate, so that she can at least feel contained, and that she has brought out the beast in him that makes her feel irresistible, because he has been unable to contain his own lust to such a degree that this monstrous, the Hyde character versus the Jekyll, is released by her own erotic power. And so we see the two sides of these fantasies then collide in creating the impossibility for love to survive in a capitalist, cutthroat world where neither the man nor the woman is any longer an oasis of love, where both parties have now become phallicized, have become male egos, and the female male ego is superior to the male ego, because the female does not have any of the fears of performance anxiety that the male has. And her body, being the object of desire, gives her a double capacity for dominance, but also, therefore, an inability to honor and obey, or even to desire. And so we see the death of love, the death of desire, and the death of the human capacity to carry on a life within a soulful level of consciousness, because both have now fallen into the chakra 3, and below that the very violent versions of chakra 2, and the ultimate needy child of chakra 1 who will be killed, who will be molested and defiled. And the relationship, with its inability for a meeting of hearts, has lost its capacity to function as a true attractor that creates a whole out of two parts. So what I think this film is a tragedy, even though you may find it to be more of a comedy, because we have gone so far since the 30s, and horror films now are no longer about this problem, which I would put within the neurotic spectrum of consciousness. Now the horror films are psychotic, And they're no longer even about this particular theme of the Il N'y a Pas, because that was a given long ago. Now there's an Il N'y a Pas at another level, in which the ego itself, internally, let alone relating to the other, can no longer hold itself together. So the morphing and the collapse and the coming apart of the fragments and threads of human consciousness at all of its various levels has made it an impossibility for the ego to have any coherence within itself. However, before I end this way too overlong introduction, I want to say that the film, as a dream, needs to be seen not only as expressing the subconscious, but also the superconscious, and that the solution to this problem is very clear. As he says in that moment in the film where he is explaining that he knows what it feels like to be God, you see, if he really did attain God consciousness, he would be able to relate to the woman. There would be able to be a relationship, but it would be a relationship of the oneself. It would be a relationship in non-duality. And rather than be monstrous, there would be an expression of divine love that would enable a new world to be born from this chaos, and a new harmony in the town and in the external environment at large. So the problem is that the ego can only have a concept of God as the dominant evil superego. It cannot have an understanding of God any longer as intelligent, loving, creative power to hold and to transform and to redream. That creative intelligence has already been cut off by the ego's materialistic focus on the body and not on the spirit. And so I hope that we are able to see this film from the perspective of those who have passed beyond this level of the Il N'y a Pas, who have entered into the truth of the inherent relationship that we have to the self, in which the monstrous ego can burn itself, not be burned by the other, but can burn itself in the fire of sacrifice, so that divine love can destroy the monstrousness of the current ego world and bring about a divine transfiguration to our true nature. But for this, the ego must die and the real self must come alive. It's alive! It's alive! But it's only alive when your ego is dead.